Chapter 2, on Value. 1. Economic quantities are, as we have seen, of three distinct orders, and these can be exchanged in 6 different ways. The 6 distinct kinds of exchange constitute the science of commerce in its widest extent, or the science of economics. We have now to investigate the laws which govern the relations of these exchangeable quantities, or the theory of value. The complete theory of value comprises 1. The definition of value. 2. The origin, source, or cause of value. 3. The general law of value, or the general equation of economics. The definition of value. 2. Value in its original sense is a quality, or desire, of the mind. It means esteem or estimation, as we speak of a highly valued friend. But such value is not an economical phenomenon. To bring value into economics it must be manifested in some tangible form, as when a person manifests his desire, estimation, or value for something by giving something in exchange for it to acquire possession of it. But as one person cannot gain possession of what belongs to another person without giving him something in exchange for it which he desires, esteems, or values, it is clear that for an exchange to take place requires the concurrence of 2 minds. If a person brought a cargo of wine to a nation of teetotalers, there would be no desire, or demand, for such a product, no one would buy it, and such a cargo would have no value among such a people. So a cargo of tobacco would have no value among a nation of non-smokers, or a cargo of beef among a nation of vegetarians. However much a person may wish to sell his product, if no one will buy it, it has no value. For an exchange to take place, so that there may be a phenomenon of value, there must be the reciprocal desire or demand of 2 persons, each for the product of the other. When, however, 2 persons agree to exchange their respective products, each product may be considered as the measure of the desire of its possessor to obtain the product of the other. And when the 2 persons have agreed upon the quantities of their respective products which are to be exchanged, the 2 products are said to be of equal value, and each product is said to be of the value of the other. Thus let A and B be any 2 economic quantities which are exchanged at any time. Then we may say A val AB, or A is of the value of B, or A equals B. Then B is the value of A in terms of B, and A is the value of B in terms of A. Hence it is clear that value is a ratio, or an equation. Like distance, or an equation, it necessarily requires 2 objects. The value of a thing is always something external to itself. It is impossible to say that any quantity has value without implying that it can be exchanged for something. Everything it can be exchanged for is its value in that commodity. Hence any economic quantity has as many values as things it can be exchanged for, and if it can be exchanged for nothing it has no value. 3. Hence a single object cannot have value. We cannot speak of absolute or intrinsic distance or equality. If it is said that an object is distant or equal, we must ask, distant from what? Or equal to what? So if it is said that an object has value, we must ask, value in what? We can no more say that a quantity is worth, than we can say that London is distant, or that £5 is equal. But any economic quantity may have value in terms of any of the others. The value of the money in the pockets of the public is the various products and services it can command. The value of the goods in the merchants' and traders' warehouses is the money in the pockets of the public. The value of a workman's labor is the wages he can earn. The value of an incorporeal right or property is the thing which may be demanded. The value of a 51. Note is 5 sovereigns. The value of a postage stamp is the carriage of a letter. The value of a promise or pledge to cut a man's hair is the cutting of his hair. The value of a railway ticket is the journey. The value of an order to see the play is seeing the play. These several rights, then, have value, and they may be bought and sold like any material chattels. Hence they are called goods and chattels, vendible commodities. 4. Price being the value of anything in money or credit. If money or credit be excessively abundant, the prices of all things will rise, but they will still preserve the same values among themselves. If a loaf of bread and a pound of meat it each cost 6pence, and if, in consequence of the excessive abundance of money or credit, they each rise to a shilling, the pound of meat is still of the value of a loaf of bread. Hence there may be a general rise or a general fall of prices. But there can be no such thing as a general rise or fall of values. Everything can no more rise or fall with respect to everything else than, as Mill says, a dozen runners can each outrun all the rest, or 100 trees can all overtop one another. To suppose that all things could rise relatively to each other would be to realize Pat's idea of society, where every man is as good as his neighbor and a great deal better too. On the error of the expression intrinsic value. 5. We must now say a few words about an expression which has been the source of immense confusion in economics, and has especially obscured the theory of credit. The value of a thing is something else for which it can be exchanged. It is therefore always something external to itself. Nevertheless, it is very common to speak of intrinsic value. Now, intrinsic means internal, something inside the quantity. The least reflection will show that to define the value of a thing to be something external to it, and then to speak of intrinsic value, are self-contradictory and inconsistent ideas. The confusion arose in this way, in modern times, when men began to think of things of value. They began to call the quality which made them desirable their value. So long ago as 1696 an able writer, Barban, pointed out the error of speaking of intrinsic value, and that the virtue or utility of a thing is totally different from its value or price. This is confounding an intrinsic quality with an external relation. Some economists term the utility of a thing its value in use, and its price its value in exchange. But in economics we have nothing to do with value in use, but only with value in exchange. Smith, however, is one of the principal authors of this confusion. In chap. V. B. I. He begins by defining the value of a thing to be the thing for which it can be exchanged, and then he suddenly changes his idea of value to be the quantity of labor expended in obtaining the thing itself. Hence, the intrinsic value of a thing came to be considered as the quantity of labor embodied as it were in it. And from this it came to be asserted that labor is the cause of all value, and value was called intrinsic. Thus it is very often said that money has intrinsic value, and that a banknote or bill of exchange is only the representative of value. It is easily seen, however, that these ideas are erroneous. Money no doubt is the produce of labor, but Smith himself says that if it were not exchangeable it would have no value. How, then, can its value be intrinsic? How can anything have intrinsic value unless it has the things it will exchange for inside itself? Can anyone perceive any lands, or houses, or corn, or books, inside a sovereign? If they cannot, the expression intrinsic value is manifestly absurd. Money and a banknote have value for exactly the same reason, because they are exchangeable. A banknote has value because it can be exchanged for money and other things. Money has value because it can be exchanged for other things. When a banknote and money can be exchanged, they have value. When they cannot be exchanged, they have no value. The expression intrinsic value is so common that persons are apt to overlook its incongruity of idea, but if we use words of similar import, whose meaning has not been so corrupted, the absurdity is apparent at once. Whoever heard of intrinsic distance, or intrinsic equality? But these expressions are not more absurd than intrinsic value. Whoever heard of the intrinsic distance of street poles, or the intrinsic equality of 5? These considerations show how necessary it is to avoid such misleading expressions as intrinsic value. On diminution in value and depreciation. 6. These two expressions are often used indiscriminately, but they are essentially distinct. An alteration in the value of a commodity means that the quantity of some other commodity with which it is compared has undergone a change. Depreciation means that it is not of the value it professes to be. Alteration in value is used in reference to some other commodity, depreciation in reference to itself. If at any time gold was 15 times as valuable as silver, and if, in consequence of the greatly increased quantity of silver, gold became 20 times as valuable as silver, silver would be said to have fallen in value with respect to gold. But if the coinage does not contain so much bullion as it professes to do, it is depreciated. Or if a banknote which professes to be of the value of 51 will only purchase 41 1 os, it is depreciated. It is very necessary to observe these distinctions in all discussions regarding the value of coins which retain the same name during a long series of ages. In the time of William I, the pound really meant a pound weight of silver bullion. Since then silver has greatly increased in quantity, and other things are used as money as well as silver. In consequence of this, silver has greatly diminished in value. But in addition to that, the pound at the present day is only about 1/3 of the pound weight of silver, so that the coinage is greatly depreciated. In consequence of these combined causes, it is often said that the modern shilling is only of the 30th part of its value in the time of William the Conqueror. On the origin, source, or cause of value. 7. We have now to determine what is the cause or source of value. There are a great variety of things of different natures which have value. We must search for some single cause which is common to them all, which being present, value is present, which when it increases, value increases, which when it decreases, value decreases, and which being absent, value is absent. Now, as we have defined the value of a thing to be any other thing for which it is exchanged, it is evident that there must always be two parties to economic value. As exchanges are voluntary, each of the two parties must have some product, and each must desire or demand the product of the other. Hence reciprocal demand is the cause of value. It is quite clear that demand is the true source or cause of value. Value is not a quality of an object, but an affection of the mind. The sole source or cause of value is human desire. When there is a demand for things, they have value. When the demand increases, the supply being supposed the same, the value increases. When the demand decreases, the value decreases, and when the demand altogether ceases, the value is altogether gone. The whole body of ancient writers made demand the sole cause of value. In modern times, Boyce Gilbert, one of the earliest writers on economics, says, consummation, demand, is the principle of all wealth. Hume says, our passions, desires or demand, are the only causes of labor. The Italian economists also are unanimous upon this point. Genovesi says, value is the child of demand. The first school of economists made all value arise from demand, and they showed that things which remain without demand, consummation, are without value. 8. This is so obvious that it might seem superfluous to dwell upon it, but, unfortunately, it is often asserted that labor is the sole cause of all value. Anyone who reflects upon this assertion must see its utter fallacy. In the first place, there are multitudes of things which have value upon which no labor was ever bestowed. In the next place, however much labor has been bestowed upon a thing, if no one will buy it, that is, if there is no demand for it, it has no value. The doctrine that labor is the sole cause of all value, and that all wealth is produced from the earth, has had the most prejudicial effect on the science of economics, whereas when we adopt exchangeability as the sole essence and principle of value and wealth, the whole subject becomes clear and simple. On the general law of value, or the general equation of economics. 9. We have now to determine the general law of value, or the general equation of economics, that is, to discover a single general law which governs the exchangeable relations of all economic quantities, whatever their nature may be, at all times, and under all circumstances. Let A and B be any two economic quantities, of any form whatever, then suppose that A remains constant while B varies, then B, or the value of A, will vary from four causes. It will increase 1. From a diminution in quantity. 2. From an increase of demand. It will decrease 1. From an increase of quantity. 2. From a diminution of demand. Now, as the variations in value of the other quantity are influenced by exactly the same four causes, it is quite clear that the variations of both quantities will be governed by 8 independent causes, and if these be connected in the form of an algebraical equation, that will manifestly be the true general equation of economics. This is the full expression of what is usually called the law of supply and demand. It means that no change can take place in the exchangeable relations of any two economic quantities, unless there is some change in the intensity of demand or the limitation of supply of one or both of the two quantities.